Well, hello, greetings, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to a session I think everybody's going to be very interested in, which is the future of connectivity in education. I'd like to thank Tariq and all of our friends at Rewired X for putting this all together. I think it's going to be a wonderful discussion. Let me start by introducing the fantastic panel for everybody today. Let me start by introducing everybody. I understand that the Minister for Sudan is having some connection issues, so we will wait until the end of the session to get some reflections from His Excellency, and we'll just quickly go on to the questions. We have a very tight script today, so I'm going to have to try my very hardest to keep everybody on time, and if I wind up having to ask you to bring your comments to a close, please forgive me in advance for interrupting you. But joining us today, we have, as I said beforehand, His Excellency Elamin Eltom, the Federal Minister of Education from Sudan, His Excellency Joseph Mucheru, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Information and Communications from Kenya, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, the Director of Telecommunication Development at the Bureau of International Telecommunication Union, my dear friend Stefania Giannini from UNESCO, the Assistant Director General for Education, Adrian Lovett, the CEO of the World Wide Web Foundation, Tendai Mashingaidze, the CEO, also our good friend of Econet EduTech, Alex Twinomugisha, the Senior Education Technology Policy Specialist from the World Bank, and of course our dear friend Tariq Al-Gur, the CEO of Dubai Cares. And Tariq will share some thoughts at the very end. So let me kick it off by sharing some points of context for everybody, and then we'll get into some questions. Briefly, for those who are not familiar with Global Partnership for Education, or GPE, GPE is the world's only partnership and fund focused exclusively on bringing a quality education to children in the 76 lower-income countries of the world. We do this so that every girl and every boy can get a quality education and unlock their full potential. Since 2002, GPE has mobilized more than $7 billion to help governments make transformative changes in their education systems, indeed so that no child is left behind. 2021 marks the beginning of GPE's fourth replenishment, and we intend to secure at least $5 billion US by 2025, continue funding our work. Rewired X, it kicks off a one-year countdown to the actual Rewired Summit, which will take place during 2021 at the 2021 World Expo. We're, of course, very excited about that and very much hoping that we'll be able to rejoin with everybody in person and mark the World Expo. Of course, as many of you know, World Expos are opportunities to share innovation, promote progress, foster cooperation. And Rewired seeks to be a catalyst to redefine education, to ensure a future that is prosperous, sustainable, innovative, and indeed accessible to all. We all know that we are in the midst of a pandemic that caught the world off guard and has now created the biggest disruption to education that the world has ever seen. 24 million children and young people are at risk of never returning to school. Still, beforehand, on top of the situation, we now see 224 million learners that remain out of school, subject to 23 countrywide school closures. Since April, GPE has witnessed a tremendous effort from governments across the globe to respond to the pandemic's impact on education. In support of these efforts, GPE has provided nearly $509 million in emergency funding to help with the COVID response for education. Funds supporting the rollout of distance learning programs that prioritize the most vulnerable and disadvantaged children, including girls, children with special needs and disabilities, children without access to electricity and internet connectivity. We've looked at a mixture of high-tech, low-tech, and no-tech solutions, depending on the context. Just to give you a few examples, in Senegal, radio and television programming have been broadcast on a flexible schedules so that girls who are typically in charge of household chores can also learn. In Malawi and Rwanda, we're also seeing emerging partnerships between telecom companies and the government to help provide online content, radio and TV, and also free bandwidth access to e-learning portals and the distribution of solar radios to girls. So you're beginning to see a range of solutions. But never has the gap been more glaring between children who have access to technology and children who don't. Children lacking internet access were disproportionately impacted by global shutdowns, and they were therefore unable to continue with their education. In sub-Saharan Africa, we know that only 2 in 10 learners has access to the internet, and only 1 in 10 live in a household that has a computer. Today, we're looking forward to hearing from all of our panelists. On the one hand, we know that connectivity is a very important part of a resilient education system, a very important part of the ability to recover from the pandemic. But we also know that investments in connectivity need to go hand in hand with investments in quality. And more than anything, we need to recognize that connectivity as a solution can't deepen the digital divide. So much to talk about today. We'll come back and hear from the minister from South Sudan when he is able to join us. Let me turn it over to our panel. We've got a fantastic panel. I've already introduced them. What I'll be doing with the panel is asking 4 different questions. I will ask several of you to answer the question as we go over the course of the event. So let me start. With the first question. I'll use first names if I can. So please allow me to be informal. I'll ask His Excellency Mr. Mucheru, Stefania, and Tendai to answer the first question. So here's the first question, and I'll ask you each to speak for just 3 minutes. What partnerships, structures, collaborations are needed to ensure that education is supported by adequate technological infrastructure to support the continuity of learning? So let's Mucheru to give us a 3-minute response to that question. Mr. Mucheru, over to you.
Thank you very much. Albright, all the panelists we have those that have joined. Thank you for allowing me to be part of this distinguished panel and really to discuss what are some of the opportunities that we can have to increase connectivity in education. I think the partnerships that we need are many, but there's some core ones, for instance, so that you can be able to connect all the schools that are required. And we've seen with the pandemic, you do need to even connect homes so that those that remain at home are still able to connect. You do need partnerships with the device manufacturers or those that produce the devices, ensuring that the devices are affordable, they're accessible, that even the parents are able to use these devices, even the teachers, so that they're able to teach and to provide the students the lessons that they need. The content partnership is also very critical because you have the right content for the kids to ensure that they continue progressively growing and learning and being able to collaborate and work even with other students. They feel that they are able to connect. Doing a lot of work with the digital literacy program, where partnership within government, the Ministry of Industry, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of ICT, the legal people, and just ensuring that together with the county governments, we're able to ensure the schools are there, the infrastructure is in place. So very many partnerships also requiring the community to get involved. In our country, the education sector has been helping us significantly. As we take connectivity, we also take electricity. So in those places we're taking electricity, we are ensuring that the community around is also able to use that electricity. We call it the last mile power connections. And again, those villages are also able to use the internet connectivity that we're providing. So many different partnerships that we must to ensure that, as we say in Africa, it takes a village to raise a child, and this is truly the case, especially now with all the technology. So that then obviously the security aspect, ensuring that even using technology, the kids are protected from harmful content, harmful people that are online. We have full visibility of what's going on with our children at any one time. So I'd say those are the key partnerships, and they're both local and international, and they continue to grow. I hope I'm not across the 3 minutes, but that would be my initial response. Thank you.
Right on time, Mr. Mucheru. Thank you so much. Stefania from UNESCO, over to you.
Thank you very much. Great
Nice
to see you, Alex, really. And thanks for having me this really great panel. Well, where we're talking now, half of the world is internet, and the other half is not. This is the real world we are living in. And this crisis, we know, has really amplified, exposed our deep reliance on connectivity. This is one of the lessons we learned. And I do believe that today, internet access is foundational, fundamental for learning in this country. And in the coming months, in the coming years, connectivity is becoming increasingly an integral part of the same concept, the concept of the right. We celebrated yesterday the anniversary of the very first convention on the right to education, the Convention Against Discrimination in Education. And if you have to update the concept, the rationale behind this important convention today is about including connectivity within that. So what can we do, what we need to do? Let me first start with something that we are planning together with partners also sitting in this room, and something we already developed under also GP, fundamental financial support in our international community working in education. The first initiative I want to mention is about Lifelines to Learning. Is an initiative that we recently planned together with Dubai Cares, and it's about establishing normative about the connectivity for education and helping address the recent complex questions about respect of different stakeholders. This is very much linked of the topic I already mentioned, connectivity as a new part of education. And what are we doing now? Facilitate country-driven process in order to develop an international declaration on connectivity for education. And this is about to be presented at the General Conference next year here at UNESCO in order to ask member states to take this leadership, their own leadership and ownership on this crucial point. And the follow-up will be for sure, hopefully in presence at the Rewire Summit next year in Dubai. Another point, another kind of partnership I want to mention, and I'm sure we have to build on that, is what we're doing together in the Global Education Coalition established from UNESCO from the beginning of this crisis, and focusing on 3 flagships, demand-driven somehow from country needs and the need they have to find quick solutions to new challenges. One is gender equality, the other one is teacher support, and the third one, last but really not least, is connectivity. And as you know very well, Alice, your organization, the Global Partnership for Education, immediately opened a window dedicated COVID response in education. And not only UNESCO, but UNESCO with other partners, especially UNICEF and World Bank, we established a permanent dialogue and partnership, which is about now thinking together, not exclusively acting together on the ground. And connectivity is one of the pillars of this.
May I request to bring to a close because we've got the minutes from Sudan.
Yes,
Join.
but I could that. So it's about really building on that. It's about the thinking and acting the challenges on the ground.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Tanya. So I'm going to ask you, if I may, to just hold on for one moment. I'm going to invite His Excellency Eltom to join us. Mr. Eltom on the phone, on the line, I should say. On March 15th, 2020, all schools in Sudan were closed by the government for several months, affecting over 2 million children and youth. This unprecedented education challenge called for innovative solutions. Could you share with us how Sudan responded? What learning programs were put in place? How did you ensure that the most marginalized children were reached? And what technologies challenges did you face? And what solutions did you employ? So, Minister Eltom, Your Excellency, over to you, sir.
Mr. White, I believe we lost the minister from the connection again. He joined and we lost him. I'm terribly sorry. I think if we carry on,
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay, no worries. So Tendai, if I could come back to you, of Econet EduTech around the question of what partnerships, financing structures, collaborations are needed to ensure that education is supported by adequate technological infrastructure. So over to you, Tendai.
Thank you very much, Alice. I think quickly for those who don't know what Econet is a telecoms operator, similar to Vodafone and Verizon in the US. We operate in a number of African countries, with Zimbabwe being our big market. I'm glad that you've asked for a perspective from a telecoms company in terms of what we thought the partnership that we needed, particularly during COVID. Because when the COVID hit and it was quite apparent online learning was needed, we were the first port of call from the educators to say we need from a connectivity point of view. But I think in discussions with the educators, with the ministry, the key thing that we thought we needed partnerships was the design of the content that was to be given to students. Many a time there wasn't so much thought around the content in as far as whether it fit into the unique challenges that we find in Africa. So, for instance, heavily loaded content with images all the time and long videos wouldn't work in an environment whereby the bandwidth is poor and whereby in many instances we have situations whereby the cost of data is high. So that's the first partnership that's needed. We need partners around content, particularly content design, where people understand the challenges we have in Africa. We were glad enough as Econet to partner with a US-based company called Learning Quality, and I just say bring an amazing proposition around offline learning, whereby we came on board fully just allow the student to download learning content and then they were able to learn offline. So that's the first partnership around the continent. The partnership will be as much as we be able to do things that zero rate the content, the data, meaning there are no charges to data like we've done in Zimbabwe, any student can access from anywhere. There is a cost to us to be able to provide that kind of service. And I come back again to the aspect of financing, innovative financing models that help telcos such as work with content providers in order to provide solutions. So I think when I end there, Alice, and a nutshell, say content design, making sure that telcos are in the middle of giving advice in terms of what kind of content is compatible with easy learning given the challenges in Africa. Finally, finance partner. We were fortunate enough to be in a position to finance in Zimbabwe for many students, but I think that's a broader discussion that needs to be had about partnership around financing.
Sorry, and I thank you very much. Really interesting perspective. We'll move on to our second question, and the question I'm going to ask Doreen, Adrian, and Alex to share the thoughts with us. So here's the question. In school closure, countries rushed to expand reach and affordability of the internet and roll out national distance learning alternatives and equip teachers and learners with adequate tools. How do we maintain the momentum on making connectivity universal and ensure that those most at risk never back to school? For example, girls and children in rural areas, children with disabilities, children from ethnic minorities are benefiting from connectivity and education. How do we sustain the momentum? So to start, I'm going to invite Doreen Bogdan-Martin from the International Telecommunication Union to share her thoughts with us. Doreen, over to you. Next, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alice. It's great to be part of this very timely conversation. When the world signed up in 2020 agenda, our pledge was simple. We know we're behind. And in the 21st century, in the wake of the COVID pandemic, I think there's no longer any doubt that leaving no one behind means leaving no one offline, meaning universal access to digital technologies needs to be our new global baseline. And in a world where 3.7 billion people are offline, as Stefania noted, we have a lot of work to do. We know more than 1 billion learners were impacted by school closures during the pandemic, forcing hundreds of millions of young people to rely on online learning. This was the largest disruption of education in modern history, because the reality is that those who still lack internet access are no education at all. And as you mentioned, in Alice, in Africa, 9 out of 10 school-age children aged 3 to 17 years old don't have internet access at home. With the World Bank predicting a loss of 10 trillion in earnings for today's young generation alone due to school closures, loss of learning opportunities, what's clear is the cost of inaction will be even higher. So what can we do? How can we sustain the momentum? Back to your question. This is where data comes in. Henrietta Ford spoke about this in the previous section. The vital importance of ensuring every child in the world has access to the life-changing power of education is the driver behind the GIGA partnership between TU, UNICEF, and others, including our friends at Cares and Tarek. GIGA's bold, it's ambitious, it's a partnership with a purpose, driven by connecting every school and every community to the internet, offering every child and young person access to information, opportunity, and choice. We address this in 3 pillars: mapping, connecting, financing, and empowering. And we are advancing our work in 30 countries, including with our friend Cabinet Secretary Mucheru in Kenya. And as Henrietta said, this is a moment we cannot waste. The need to close the digital divide is urgent, and that urgency will not go away when COVID does. We need to ensure that we capitalize on this worldwide focus and the attention on digital. We take this on at scale with the UN system, the G7, the G20, governments, donors, MDBs, civil society, private sector. We need all hands on deck to get it done. Our kids and future generations are depending on us. Thank you.
Doreen, thank you. Great to hear the energy and the focus coming out of you and your organization. Let me turn it over to Adrian Lovett, CEO of the World Wide Web Foundation. Adrian, 3 minutes, please. Nice to see you.
You
or hear
too.
you.
I hope you can hear me okay. Many thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Alice. Good to be with you, and thank you for your leadership on these issues over some time now. We wouldn't be where we are without you, and also Dr. Tariq and the great work of Dubai Cares in this area. To answer your question, I think momentum needs optimism, and optimism needs leadership, and the belief that we can change the world for millions of children and young people. It starts with that belief. 2 decades ago, I, along with a number of people involved in this conversation, was proud to be part of the movement for debt cancellation. $95 billion of debt was cancelled. 40 million children had an education as a result of that who would not otherwise have done, not have had that chance. That was a result of leadership, of determined action, and of activism around the world. And we can harness the same spirit today, I think, as we ensure that every child has the opportunity to harness the incredible benefits of technology and connectivity in order to learn and to fulfill their potential and achieve their dreams. We know that digital inequality falls along lines of wealth and of gender and of a rural and urban divide. We've got to ensure that this does not preclude these groups from benefiting from the potential of connectivity in education. 31 years ago, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the Web Foundation that I'm proud to lead, invented the World Wide Web. It was always intended to be a public good for everyone. And yet in 2020, as Stefania said earlier, half the world is connected, but still half the world is not. That's not good enough. And that's why this year, Tim told the United Nations in September that internet access must be understood as a basic human right. And COVID-19 has underlined that the web is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. And that's true above all in education. There was an extraordinary image that many may have seen in the Hindu newspaper in India a few months ago of Namita Narayanan, who was sat on the tiled roof of her home, her family home in Kottakkal in Malappuram state in India. She sat on the roof because it was the only way she could get a decent mobile phone signal to take part in her online classes. Now, she is willing to go to those extraordinary lengths to learn and to engage and to have the opportunity to benefit from education. We have to show the same commitment to her and to millions like her to ensure that we can bring the benefits of technology to all those who want and can expect to learn. But while we must continue all our efforts to connect schools and increase the digital skills of all people, including young learners, supporting digital citizens, the pandemic has shown that connecting schools alone doesn't create enough digital resilience in the face of a pandemic such as COVID. So we've got to look beyond that, I think, and a holistic approach to connectivity is needed. One where broadband infrastructure, affordability, and quality connections and appropriate devices are key. And at the Web Foundation, with the Alliance for Affordable Internet, that's a coalition that we're very proud to host and to lead at the Web Foundation, we've kind of landed on this idea of meaningful connectivity, and we think this might be a key for young people and for learners to ensure that, you know, connectivity is not just a sort of binary on and off state. It's more complicated than that. When we talk about meaningful connectivity, we're thinking not just about whether you can connect, whether you have the technological means to connect. Is there a signal that you can connect to? But also, is that affordable? We've got to ensure that that connecting for countries and for communities and for individuals and families is affordable. We have a target called the 1 for 2 target, where 1 gigabyte of data should cost no more than 2% of average monthly income. And that's a target that many, many more countries are starting to hit now. And it's exciting to see that, but we've got a long way to go still. But it also means, when we talk about meaningful connectivity, talking about people having enough data, people having a fast enough connection and download speed, people having a frequency of access, and having the right kind of device in their hand, the level of a phone or a keyboard or computer that enables them to really benefit from all of the extraordinary benefits that the internet has to offer. So for us,
Adrian, may I ask you to bring it to a close? I'm sorry, we're getting crunched on time. I apologize.
Indeed, I'll leave it there. But meaningful connectivity for us is a way that we can see a framework that we can build together to ensure that every child has the kind of access that they deserve.
Thanks so much, Adrian. Alex, let me turn it over to you. Alex from the World Bank.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here. To dive right into the question, actually, I think the question should be not only how do we maintain, but how do we accelerate efforts? Because we've done a lot, but we could do a lot more. And my fellow panelists have talked about the digital infrastructure part, which is absolutely important. I think that partnerships will be critical to maintaining and accelerating the momentum. The ministries of education need to work very, very closely with the ministries of ICTs. The reality is that the connectivity budget in many countries lies with the Ministry of ICT and the expertise. And so leveraging things like the universal access funds, the universal service funds that many countries have. Kenya does actually offer a very good model for partnership between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of ICT that many countries can learn from. But let me also say that to really have an impact, we have to go back to kind of learning. And that will require that we pay particular attention to our teachers, that our teachers have the skills. Well, our teachers, first of all, have access. So that means they have the connectivity and the devices and the content, but they also that they need the skills to be able to use this connectivity. And then also, let's not forget about the organizational capabilities in the ministries of education. Not only to deploy and manage the technology, but also to be able to use data. And at the bank, we've summarized this in kind of 5 key principles, which I'll share very quickly. The first one is always ask yourself why. What do we need? What's the education objective we need to achieve? That should be the overriding driver of the investments that we make. The second, I think, related to this particular question you asked is, it has to be for all. That includes the most vulnerable and the disabled kids. I think inclusivity is going to be a key focus going forward. The third principle is, we have to empower teachers. And then the fourth is that it will be a partnership with the whole ecosystem. And lastly, that one of the powerful things that connectivity does and digital technologies is enables us to collect and use data in real time. And so paying attention to the ability to use data for decision-making will be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. What a great answer. We love your background too, and you've really been very tangible in what we need to think about. So thank you for that. Let's move on to our third question. And I will ask Doreen, Adrian, Tendai, and His Excellency, Mr. Joseph, to answer the question. So this is a question about the future. Fast forward to 2030 and imagine that we actually have achieved universal connectivity. What hurdles will we have overcome? What do you expect to be the most challenging of those hurdles, whether or not be it technology, cost, regulation, infrastructure, and who will have come together to really help drive being able to overcome these challenges? So think forward and let's share what journey we will have gone through to get there. So, and these are, I'm going to make it even harder this time. It's a 2-minute answer. And I will start with Doreen. Over to you, Doreen. And then we'll go to Adrian, Tendai, and His Excellency, Mr. Mucheru. So Doreen, over to you, 2 minutes, please.
Great, thank you, Alice. So if we've achieved universal connectivity and it's 2030, it means that we've connected the 3.7 billion that are still offline. It means we're averaging 370 million people a year for the next 10 years. It means we've closed the digital gender gap. And it also means that we've answered the $428 billion question, because that's what we estimate it will cost to connect the unconnected. It may also mean that we've actually achieved the 17 SDGs, because connectivity is an essential enabler to achieve each and every one of those SDGs. So the challenges and hurdles we would overcome, normally I would say political will, but it's there today thanks to COVID. So other challenges. So we've abandoned the silo-based thinking models. We get governments to think holistically. It would mean that we've addressed the financing challenges. We've come up with innovating financing models that Tendai mentioned before. It would mean that services and devices are now affordable. We've tackled that. That we've constructed the right policy and regulatory frameworks that are enabling. We've tackled the digital skills that Alex just mentioned, teacher training, content development in formats that are accessible and available. We got the infrastructure out there in the rural and remote areas, tackled data protection, privacy, online safety. Those are all the hurdles I think we would have had to address. In all of this, collaboration is going to be key. This comes to the who, and I can't overstress the importance of working together through a participatory approach where all stakeholders play their role. One thing's absolutely certain, no one is going to be able to get this done. We need the international community, governments, private sector, local communities, civil society, academia. We all need to work together to get it done if we're going to realize this vision by 2030. Thank you.
Doreen, thank you. What a great sort of tangible list of things to be thought about and focused on. Adrian, let me turn it over to you with the same question.
Yes, I mean, I would want to echo and I hope reinforce rather than just copy the excellent words that my friend Doreen just shared there. I would pick up on one part of that, and I do think if we're looking back from 2030, if we have cracked the financing challenge, then we've found a way to crack the whole problem. Financing is going to be key to universal connectivity. And that analysis that Doreen referred to, that we were happy to work on with the ITU, does show that we need $428 billion to make universal access to 4G a reality for everyone. Now that cost, it's a big number, and yet it's not. You know, it's about what the world spends every year on fizzy drinks. And this is a sum that's required over 10 years. So it's something that we can set our sights on and can achieve, but it obviously requires more than any one single actor to fulfill the scale of the investment that's needed in the next 10 years. All sectors have to come together and to cooperate. The private sector is going to be crucial in delivering this, from building infrastructure to working on ways to reduce data packages and the cost of devices to individuals and communities. The world needs another 700,000 kilometers of fiber infrastructure, for example. That's enough to wrap around the world 17 times, but that's something that's within our reach with a true partnership effort, a multi-stakeholder effort. The public sector and civil society have got to work hand in hand with the private sector to ensure fully rounded plans for digital development. Infrastructure is a big part of the challenge, but so too complementary policy frameworks and digital skills programs. The critical point is the multi-stakeholder approach. And I think if we can harness that and apply that to the challenge of finance and then deliver the policy solutions that are enabled with that finance, then we can hit that 2030 ambition.
I think you're absolutely right, Adrian, about the finance. It's a critical part of the equation. Let me turn it over to Tendai from Econet. Same question for you, Tendai. Hi, Tendai.
Thanks, Alice. I think the biggest challenge, and I speak obviously from a point of view of seeing some of the challenges that we have on the African continent, is going to be whether we are going to be able to get ministries of education to come out of the blocks quickly to change curriculum to suit the demands of the marketplace. In 10 years' time, that's 2030, we know that we're getting reports that 50% of tasks are going to be replaced by future jobs. Automation, digitization, artificial intelligence, and those lovely words are going to be real in terms of the kind of skills that students that are graduating are going to need. Sitting in a situation whereby you mentioned the statistic that 1 out of every 10 households in Africa does not have a computer. I think 80% of schools in Africa do not have computers. How are we going to bridge that massive divide to get students to start learning new skills that are needed only 10 years from now? I mean, kids that are in school now have less than 10 years, most of them. To get to that point in time, we need to move fast, in order to be able to, to get to that point. So I think that's the greatest challenge, and it speaks to the, things that we mentioned before around financing. It speaks about particularly partnerships with employers. They've got to be, informing the curriculum, informing what kind of decisions that need to be made at that level, and they need to be involved in that investment because at the end of the day, it affects them. So for me, future skills, I think, key priority going forward. I think I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Tendai. Let me turn it over to His Excellency, Mr. Mucheru from Kenya. Mr. Mucheru, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alice. And this is a great question because if we're fast forwarding and there's no COVID, it means we're going to have an even better world. But even more so, I mean, the ambition of having universal connectivity, that's amazing. So I really align myself with all the answers that have just been given by my distinguished panelists in answering. I think I associate fully with what they're saying. But you see, one of our biggest challenges is there's an information divide. We've been trying to deal with an information poverty. And if we have universal connectivity, then it means there's universal information. People are able to access whatever information they need. So it's then easier to have the right partnerships. It's easier to have the right policies in place. And really that human challenge of bringing people together, people to see this is a big challenge and they put all the resources together to make it work. If we look at the way the world has come together to find a vaccine for COVID-19, then I expect that one of the key challenges that would have been overcome by ensuring universal connectivity is that the world would have seen that this connectivity for all the children and for the schools is critical and is required, and therefore, they would come together and resolve this problem. So we would have really a much greater world, and with everybody having the right amount of information to be able to partner, to be able to ensure that you have the right courses, all the policies required, whether it's policies cross-border, whether it's interconnectivity between different networks for broadband, how you charge for over-the-top services, and so on. There's going to be many areas that would have been resolved, and I really look forward to 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mucheru, Excellency. Thank you. So we're on to our fourth question, and this is sort of a summary type of question. I'll give each one of the panelists 1 minute. And here's the question. What is the one change you would foresee for education over the next decade? And let me put maybe perhaps a bit of a twist on it, which is if you think about the goal of quality education being made available equitably, what is the most important change that we need to aspire to for education over the next decade? Unfortunately, the minister from Sudan has not been able to connect. So I'm going to, let me go back to you to start with again, Excellency Mr. Mucheru from Kenya. What is the one big change that needs to happen over the next decade? And for each question, please, a minute. So over to you, sir.
Thank you again, Alice. I think this is a great question. And really for us here in Kenya, one of the key issues has been ensuring we have a competency-based curriculum. We're now, seeing very many new skills that are being introduced. And really some of the new jobs that are coming up, there's even no training whatsoever. So ensuring that we have a competency-based curriculum available to all the children across the country is really critical. So I would say that is the top change, ensuring that we train all the teachers, we ensure parents understand what it is that we're doing, and that we have all the right content, all the right infrastructure, so that our children now learn all the new 21st century skills of partnerships, skills of having the technology, skills of innovation, skills of engineering, management of information. All those are very critical. And so long as the education system provides that competency-based curriculum, I believe we're going to be able to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. And what's of course interesting about that is how much it touches on content, on technology, on delivery. It's not just a standalone item. Over to you, Doreen. What is the one big shift that you foresee for education over the next decade?
Thank you, Alice. Well, I think it's not just universal school connectivity, but integrating technology into the learning process. And I think that's going to mean leveraging the power of connectivity and technology to complement traditional teaching and learning approaches, fostering innovation, as His Excellency just mentioned, finding ways to reach the disadvantaged communities to ensure that they have access to quality education, adapting to the individual learning needs and abilities of students. I would say also allowing safe and protected online spaces, and ultimately providing learners and educators with the digital skills, again, His Excellency mentioned that they need to thrive and to improve their lives and the lives of others in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doreen. Stefania Giannini from UNESCO, let me come back to you.
Thank you, Alice. Well, I think that in addition to what has already been clearly said, my from my colleagues, we must ensure that technology adapts the learners in their diversity. We usually ask learners to adapt to technology. I think now it's a bit the contrary we had to develop. I think that we are beginning to see wider recognition that going forward, the digital divide is less of a technical challenge than a human and educational challenge. It is true that 10, 20 years ago, the technical infrastructure was not in place to connect the majority of people. Today, things are different. We know, we see the challenge, we see also the progress that has been done. Good quality mobile networks cover over 93% of the world's population, and this connectivity is often affordable. Even prices need to come down further for sure. So our challenge now is a harder one, I think. It's about building the literacy skills and the digital competencies that allow people to make productive use of connectivity. That means valorizing the human side of technology in education.
Stefania, thank you. Let me turn it over to Adrian from the World Wide Web Foundation. Adrian Lovett, over to you for 1 minute.
Thank you, Alice. I think the shift that I would foresee, and I guess I would like to foresee and believe we can bring about, is one that really spotlights the need for connectivity for girls as well as for boys, and for women as well as men. And that's important in two senses, in terms of simply getting access to the web and to the internet to support education for girls and for their wider experience, and also for that experience online being a safe and empowering one. On the access side, we know that at the moment, men are 21% more likely to be online than women. That's 52% more likely in the least developed countries. We need to see more devices in the hands of girls, not just boys. We need to see the time that's available to be online equally divided between girls and boys. But also, when people are online, of course, that experience needs to be empowering, to be safe. People need to be protected, and that's particularly true for girls and young women, who are more likely to be the target of abuse and harassment and hate online than boys and young men are. And that's something we need to fix as well. The web needs to be not just a neutral actor in the education system. It needs to be a positive force for good, something that serves as a public good, that serves humanity.
Adrian, thank you. Tendai, over to you.
Thanks, Alice. I think I have to agree with His Excellency Minister Mucheru, as well as Doreen, around a revamp on overall of school curriculums, so that they begin to speak to skills that are needed for the future. I think we need not only to have a curriculum changed or improved, but we need to have an enabling environment in the classroom that allows students to get a crack and a good crack at getting a job 10, 15 years from now.
Thanks, Tendai. I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Alex from the World Bank.
Yeah.
Hi,
Alice.
Alex.
Hi, Alice. Let me start by saying that 10 years in education is like a blink, and education is very resilient to change. In fact, we've been trying to use technology to transform education for many, many years, seemingly without much success. But I really believe that the pandemic has sent the shock that we needed, and it's been global, not just localized, for us to really start having a serious conversation about transforming education. In fact, some of my colleagues have said that for the first time, ministries are willing to listen to some transformative ideas, and that educators everywhere realize that things must change. Given that, I think the one thing that I hope to see over the next 10 years is truly children being able to learn anywhere, anytime, and that learning is personalized, that the systems adapt to support the child's level, that is personalized to the child's level and abilities and interests. That's really what I hope. And I think that for the first time, this is probably feasible.
Alex, thank you. So I'm going to try to wrap up. I'm also very conscious of time and conscious that I want to make sure that we've got plenty of time to hear from our dear friend Tariq from Dubai Cares. But what struck me about this conversation is that there's a significant unanimity of view. And one of the things that the pandemic has done, perhaps this might be one of the few silver linings to it, is that it has begun to really open the door to what the future of education could look like, but on an accelerated basis. And that is because of the shock that the pandemic has posed to education. And so what all of the panelists have outlined are what I would call in some ways a common to-do list that includes a series of what I would call sort of hard fixes. These are on the infrastructure side, connectivity, networks meshing together, looking at the device question, the cost of connectivity. So there's obviously a series of what I would call fixes necessary on the hard side. I was very interested in Tendai, what you were saying from the private sector perspective on this. There's also a series of fixes and policy considerations on the soft side. And this is about training. It's about thinking about content. It's thinking about how content needs to be reshaped, given not only slowly, but perhaps surely moving into more of a digital or partial digital environment, but it's also about training teachers to work in what is going to, I think, continue to be a relentlessly changing environment. I don't necessarily see the education sector moving backwards from what has now come before us with the pandemic. So clearly some very important soft changes. There are some, I think, deep questions that are going to be required from a financing perspective. The numbers that have been just talked about, Adrian, by you in terms of $400+ billion of financing necessary to think simply about the hard infrastructure types of changes. On the one hand, breathtaking numbers, but on the other hand, compared to some of the other major undertakings that the world has gone through to sort of accelerate itself, perhaps a number when you amortize it over time that could begin to become considerable when you think about the long-term payoffs associated with this type of investment. But clearly there's some financial challenges. There are also, I think, some governance and societal challenges. We need to begin to think about how do we think about education for the future. One of the points that one of the panelists made about the ministries of technology and ICT working with education ministries, a very interesting topic and one that I think deserves further exploration. So this has, I think, been an incredibly rich panel. Let me thank all of you for a huge amount of preparation. Please don't hesitate to keep a hold of your notes and perhaps we can bring it all together into some kind of a sort of a common sense of direction here. But clearly a lot to follow up on. We all know that 2030 in some ways is around the corner, even though it's only 2020. And we've got some real milestones ahead of us in terms of reach. So let me thank you all very much. Tariq, let me turn it over to you. I hope that you found this to be very rich food for thought as we are in the Rewired X and Expo moment, which is a moment to think about the future, about innovation and what we do. So let me thank you for all of your hard work and focus and turn it over to you to close us out and give us your closing remarks. Tariq, over to you.
Thank you, Alice, indeed. And I can't agree with you more, Alice, the way you summed it up. And I don't want anyone from the sector to be upset on what I'm going to say, but the sector was and still is fragmented, but maybe fragmentation was the solution for the interim period that we were going through for a bit less than 2 decades. But now more than ever, I see the sector coming up strongly and united, and I see that we're going to work together. And we have learned through COVID. I think if COVID did one thing, Alice, one thing, it really united the education sector, because that's what happened. Education really got disrupted globally, and I was just told by the team that the echo issue that happened earlier was a global Zoom issue. Zoom was going through a connectivity issue, and it was global, and we got hit at the wrong time. But what I think actually it's the curse of this connectivity session happening globally. So maybe it could have been a curse. So I will just start putting everything together in a different way. First of all, I would like to thank this distinguished group, of course, for all of their contributions to the session, and of course, my dear friend and my partner in crime for everything related to education, Alice Albright, for the excellent moderation. I was particularly struck by a few key points mentioned in this plenary, which I will reflect briefly. It's very hard because I can't even read my own writing. So let's see how this goes. So Minister Joe mentioned connectivity to the marginalized in a nutshell. Stefania mentioned about partnerships, collaboration. I can't agree with you more, Stefania. This is what's needed, and it's a time. Our friend Tendai from Econet, he spoke about online learning needed through telecommunication companies. Content design, I love that, content design. Of course, he stressed on financing, and some others also stressed on financing, and he also mentioned about the adequate bandwidth that we should have in countries. Doreen, she mentioned internet access, and that is what caused the digital divide between us as well. And we have to broaden the internet access as well. She also mentioned about the financing issue. Adrian, on the other hand, I love you, Adrian. I mean, you spoke everything that is hidden. These are the back scenes no one would see. He spoke about leadership. He spoke about ambition. He spoke about that we have to be optimistic. And that's what we need to do right now to kick off the next 10 years, basically, and have a holistic approach towards connectivity. And Alex, of course, spoke about to approach connectivity and education as an investment rather than looking at it as funding. So it's an investment. And he mentioned also about inclusivity and not only collecting data, but also to use the data. I also echo the panel's thoughts that this year has been presented a real challenge for all of us collectively when it comes to access and connectivity for learning. With over 50 active programs globally, we at Dubai Cares have seen both the disruption, but also the innovation and resilience our partners and the governments they are working with have shown. The unprecedented global disruption to education during this pandemic has also reminded us that we are all connected in some way. The fact that nearly half of all school-age children still do not have access to the internet and their learning is impacted as a result is of course unaccepted to all of us. And as stakeholders and members of this international education community, we cannot allow this to continue further, and we all have to come together to address these structural connectivity issues and learning disruptions once and for all. I do, however, feel that we have a real window of opportunity to respond with decisive action. And looking ahead, the emphasis has to be on two key things: financing and collaboration. And that's what we have been mentioning during this whole session. The first, though, is dependent on the second. We cannot achieve what we need to without us committing to collaboration and streamlining efforts. Streamlining is very important, not on the national level, but even on the highest level. And in the absence of these, any efforts, no matter how big they are in terms of financial value, these efforts will be at risk of being fragmented and inefficient. Dubai Cares has also been working closely with UNICEF's Generation Unlimited on GIGA initiative, which Doreen referenced during the discussion. We financed the initial business case for digital connectivity for GenU that highlighted this important work a bit more than 2 years ago. This initiative, I believe, is one of the most promising solutions to address the connectivity gaps in schools and a strong example of collaboration. We were talking about it earlier in terms of partnership between UNICEF, GenU, and the ITU, not to mention all of the other partners on the ground as well. I'm therefore delighted to announce that Dubai Cares is committing $2.5 million towards GIGA that will contribute to country pilots and developing case studies and financial modeling structures. I'm also excited to share with you that we are working with UNESCO in coordination with other partners such as UNICEF and the ITU on a global declaration on connectivity for learning and livelihoods that Stefania mentioned in her opening remarks. And that will be launched at Rewired Summit next year during Expo 2020. So that's next December, basically. Therefore, Dubai Cares will be committing $700,000 towards this effort. And I'm confident that this declaration will present an important opportunity to reinforce the commitment of the global community towards connectivity, facilitate more in-country conversations, and identify targeted actions for governments, donor agencies, and the private sector to ensure access to connectivity becomes attainable for all students and youth. And finally, I know I've taken long, but it's worth it, trust me. I want to end with a sobering reminder and call for action with regards to the issue of financing of education more broadly, a theme that has become or that has come up in nearly every session today. The recent Save Our Future white paper highlighted that budgets for education are at risk of being slashed due to the financial impacts of COVID. And this could lead to a huge funding gap of almost $200 billion per annum for low and middle income countries. Education financing is of greater importance than ever before due to the current environment. And we need to come together to focus on key upcoming opportunities to amplify this message and to encourage commitments such as the G7 and the G20, and of course, the GPE replenishment in July next year, a crucial budgetary calendar moment that everyone should be working towards. And with that, day one of Rewired will shortly be drawing to a close. And I would like to thank all the members of this panel, including Alice, as well as everyone for attending today. And I hope that you will tune in for day two. And I have and to have a good wrap for the day, I'm delighted to welcome His Excellency Abdullah Nasser Luta, the Director General of the UAE Prime Minister's Office. He is the person behind the success of the SDGs Global Councils that was hosted by the World Government Summit here in Dubai for 2 years. And Abdullah, I'll pass the mic to you for your closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tariq. Thank you. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you all so much, and apologies for the inevitable connection issues in a connectivity session that were out of our hands. I'll let Tariq, but I just wanted you to know the feed is closed now, so.
What? Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. That was fantastic.
Really, it was an amazing
really great
session.
panel.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you
healthy.
everyone so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.